The Christmas lights cast warm shadows across my childhood home in Detroit as I settled into Dad's old leather recliner. At 34, I still felt like a kid when I walked through that front door, especially during holidays when Mom went all out with decorations. But this Christmas Eve felt different. Mom kept glancing toward the kitchen counter where a manila envelope sat among the Christmas cards, and Dad looked tense behind his newspaper. "Michael, honey, can you sit down for a minute?" Mom's voice carried a weight I'd never heard before.
Yes, sure.
"Mom, everything okay?" She picked up the envelope with trembling hands. "I've been thinking about this for months. Your father and I need to talk to you about something important." Right. My stomach dropped. I'd been living in my own apartment for 2 years after spending my 20s bouncing between jobs and relying on my parents, more than I should have. Mom opened the envelope and pulled out papers covered in her neat handwriting columns of numbers and dates stretching back years. I recognized the entries: rent payments when I was short, car repairs, emergency dental work, groceries during lean months. "This is everything we've helped you with over the years," Mom said quietly. "From when you were 22 until last month when you needed help with your security deposit." The total at the bottom made my mouth go dry: $47,832. "Mom, I don't understand. Are you saying I owe you money?" Dad folded his newspaper carefully. "We love you, Michael. But we're getting older, and we need to start thinking about our future. The medical bills for my surgery, the roof repairs, Mom's reduced hours. We're not asking for everything at once," Dad added, "but we need you to start paying us back. Maybe a few hundred a month." I felt like the room was spinning. "I can't believe you've been keeping track of all this. Thought you were just being parents." Mom's face crumpled slightly. "We were being parents, Michael. But now we need you to be an adult." I stood up abruptly. "I need some air." Outside, the December cold bit at my cheeks as I called my sister Sarah. "Merry Christmas Eve, big brother," she answered cheerfully. "Sarah, did you know about this? The bill?" Mom just handed me a list of every penny they've ever given me. Board. $47,000. The silence told me everything. "They talked to you about this, didn't they?" "Michael, I think it's about time. You're 34. You have a good job now? Your own apartment? Did you ever think about what depending on them was costing them?" I ended the call, hands shaking. Through the kitchen window, I could see Mom and Dad talking quietly, looking older and more fragile than I'd ever seen them. For the first time, I realized my parents weren't just my parents. They were people with their own struggles, fears, and needs. And I'd been so focused on my problems that I'd never considered theirs. Christmas Day passed in a daze. The turkey Mom had spent hours preparing tasted like cardboard while I went through the motions of family traditions, my mind racing with numbers and possibilities. Dad caught my eye and nodded toward the garage. "Want to help me move some boxes?" Outside, he pulled out 2 folding chairs beside his workbench. "This is hard for her, you know. She's been losing sleep over it for months." "Then why didn't you talk to me sooner?" Dad picked up a screwdriver, turning it over in his hands. "Because she kept hoping you'd start offering to help without us having to ask." He pulled out a folder from beneath some magazines, showing me their financial statements. The numbers were stark: medical bills, home repairs, and a retirement account that had been steadily drained. "Your mother's been working extra shifts, but she's 62, Michael. She shouldn't be pulling doubles to make ends meet because we're supporting a grown man." The words stung because they were true. I want to help, but I barely have enough for myself. "Then you need to figure it out. Get a second job, find a roommate, cut expenses. Do whatever it takes. How much do you need?" $500 a month to start." That night, I sat in my apartment staring at a spreadsheet of my expenses. The numbers didn't lie, was spending money I didn't have on things I didn't need. Cable, unused gym membership, constant takeout instead of cooking. I called my best friend Marcus, who'd been trying to convince me to move in with him for months. "Is that roommate offer still open?" Moving in with Marcus felt like stepping backward, but it would cut my housing costs in half. Combined with eliminating unnecessary expenses, I could make the payments work. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt hope. Maybe I could finally start acting like the adult my parents needed me to be. Living with Marcus was an adjustment. At 34, I was sharing a bathroom again, but Marcus didn't make me feel like a failure. His steady income as a physical therapist showed in his organized adult lifestyle, a stark contrast to my collection of mismatched furniture and takeout habits. The first morning, I woke up to the sound of Marcus's 5:30 a.m. alarm for his workout. Routine, as I lay in bed listening to him move efficiently through his morning routine shower. Protein shake, meal prep for the day, realized how chaotic my own schedule had become. I'd been hitting snooze until the last possible moment, grabbing fast food for breakfast and showing up to work barely on time. "There's an opening at the clinic," Marcus said, one evening as we ate the chicken and rice bowls he'd prepared for the week. "Part-time evening shift, equipment maintenance, and patient transport. $15 an hour. "I don't know anything about medical equipment," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were just another excuse. "They'll train you. It's moving wheelchairs, cleaning equipment, helping patients get to their cars, but it's money you could earn after your regular job." I looked around Marcus's well-organized living room, the investment books on his coffee table, and the financial planning documents he'd left visible on his desk. Here was someone my age, who had his life together, who was building toward something. Instead of just surviving day to day, you'd think they'd really hire me? "Michael, you're one of the most reliable people I know when you put your mind to something. The problem is, you've never had to put your mind to anything because someone was always there to catch you when you fell." His words stung because they were true. But instead of getting defensive, I found myself nodding. Set up the interview. Next day, I found myself in the rehabilitation center lobby with a hastily printed resume, wearing the one decent shirt I owned. The facility was busier than I had expected, with patients of all ages working with therapists, family members sitting anxiously in waiting areas, and staff moving purposefully between treatment rooms. The facility director, Janet, was a woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that seemed to see right through any pretense. She looked over my application with practiced efficiency. "Marcus says you're reliable and need the work," she said, setting down my resume. 20 hours a week, mostly evenings and weekends. You'd work with patients recovering from strokes, accidents, surgeries. Some are having the worst time of their lives. Can you handle that? Right. I thought about my parents carrying their burden while I focused on my own problems. "Yes, ma'am. The pay isn't much, but the work is important. These people are fighting to get their lives back, and sometimes the difference between giving up and pushing forward is having someone who treats them with dignity and respect. Can you do that?" "I can do that." "Good. You start Monday at 6. First night was overwhelming. The rehab center after hours felt different from the busy daytime atmosphere Marcus had shown me. The hallways were quieter, the lighting dimmer, and the patients who came for evening sessions often seemed more fragile, more vulnerable than I'd expected. My supervisor, Carlos, was a soft-spoken man who'd been working in rehabilitation for over 15 years. He showed me around the facility, explaining the different types of equipment and the basic protocols for patient safety. "Most important thing," he said as we stood in the equipment storage room, "is remembering that these people aren't just patients. They're someone's mother, father, husband, wife. They had full lives before whatever happened to them, and they're fighting to get back to those lives." The work was harder than expected, both physically and emotionally. I spent evenings helping elderly patients who'd suffered strokes relearn how to walk, carrying wheelchairs and walkers between therapy rooms, and cleaning specialized equipment that helped people regain basic motor functions. The pay was modest, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was earning every dollar. Mrs. Patterson, a 17-year-old woman recovering from hip replacement surgery, became my favorite patient. She arrived every Tuesday and Thursday evening with her daughter, a woman about my age who worked 2 jobs to help pay for her mother's care. Mrs. Patterson had the same stubborn determination I recognized in my mother, refusing help unless absolutely necessary. "Young man," she said one evening as I helped her from her wheelchair to the parallel bars where she practiced walking, What's got you looking so serious all the time? Just working through some family stuff, Mrs. Patterson. Family stuff is the hardest stuff, she said, gripping the bars with white knuckles as she took careful steps. But it's also the most important stuff. Don't you forget that. I watched her struggle with each step, her face contorted with effort and pain, but she never complained. Her daughter sat in the corner, doing homework for a night class while keeping one eye on her mother's progress. How long have you been taking care of her? I asked the daughter one evening. Since Dad died 3 years ago, she replied, not looking up from her textbook. Hip replacement was supposed to help her maintain independence, but recovery's been slower than expected. That must be expensive. Everything's expensive when you're starting over, she said with a tired smile. But she's my mom. What else am I going to do? Her words echoed in my head for days. Here was a woman my age, working multiple jobs and going to school, all while caring for her elderly mother. She never complained, never seemed to resent the responsibility. It was just what you did for family. 3 weeks into my new routine, I was exhausted but oddly satisfied. My days started at 7 a.m. at the parts distributor and ended at 10 p.m. at the rehab center, with barely enough time to eat dinner and do laundry on weekends. But for the first time in my adult life, I was contributing something meaningful. The math was simple and brutal. After rent to Marcus, food, gas, minimum payments on my credit cards, I had about $400 left each month. Not enough to meet Dad's request for $500, but more than I'd ever been able to save before. I wrote my first check to my parents on a Saturday morning, $300. It's less than the $500 Dad had mentioned, but it felt monumental. I drove to their house, finding Mom in the kitchen, preparing for her shift at the hospital. Michael, what are you doing here so early? She asked, looking surprised to see me. I pulled the check from my wallet, my hand shaking slightly as I set it on the counter next to her coffee mug. It's not much, but it's a start. Mom picked up the check, her own hands trembling as she read the amount, and my careful handwriting in the memo line. First payment, with love. Honey, you don't have to. Yes, I do, I interrupted, my voice stronger than I felt. I should have been doing this a long time ago. She set the check down and hugged me fiercely, and I could feel her tears on my shoulder. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. I'm sorry it took me so long to grow up, I said into her graying hair. Oh, sweetheart, we all grow up in our own time. Important thing is that you're doing it now. Dad appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing his weekend work clothes and carrying a cup of coffee. When he saw the check on the counter, his expression softened in a way I hadn't seen in months. How are you managing this? He asked, genuine concern in his voice. Second job at a rehabilitation center. 20 hours a week helping patients with therapy sessions. That must be difficult work. It is, but it's good work, and it's teaching me things I needed to learn.
Dad
Nodded slowly. Your mother and I never wanted to make you feel like we were keeping score, Michael. We just needed you to understand that actions have consequences, and that we couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I understand now. And I understand that this isn't just about paying you back. It's about proving to myself that I can be the kind of person who honors his commitments. For the first time since Christmas, I felt like I was moving in the right direction. The debt was enormous and the road long, but I was finally walking it instead of running away. More importantly, I was beginning to understand that the real debt wasn't financial, it was the years I'd spent taking their love and support for granted, assuming it would always be there no matter how irresponsibly I acted. As I drove home to Marcus's house, I thought about Mrs. Patterson and her daughter. About the sacrifices people make for family without expecting recognition or gratitude. I thought about my parents, who'd given me 3 decades of patience and support, and about the man I was finally becoming. The work was hard, the hours were long, and the pay was modest. But for the first time in my adult life, I was building something instead of just surviving. And that felt like the beginning of real change. Spring brought new understanding of adult responsibility. I'd been working both jobs for 3 months, but the toll was becoming apparent. Days started at 7 a.m. at the parts distributor and ended at 10 p.m. at the rehab center. It's barely time to eat and sleep. You're pushing yourself pretty hard. Marcus observed one evening as I collapsed onto the couch. It's the only way I'll ever get caught up. When's the last time you took a day off? I couldn't remember. Every day blended together in a cycle of work, sleep, and money worry. I'd increased payments to $400 monthly, but at that rate, it would take over 10 years to pay off the debt. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in April. Worked a double shift at the rehab center, covering for a sick colleague. By midnight, I still had to be at work by 7 a.m. My phone rang as I fumbled with my keys. Michael, thank God you answered. Sarah sounded panicked. Dad's in the hospital. Chest pains at work. Can you come? The drive to Detroit Medical Center was a blur. I found Mom in the waiting area, her nursing uniform wrinkled, face pale with worry. They think it's stress-related. His blood pressure is through the roof. They're keeping him overnight for observation. Stress-related. What kind of stress? Mom looked at me with tired eyes. Oh, Michael. You know what kind? The guilt hit like a physical blow. Dad was hospitalized because of the financial pressure I'd created. Years of depending on them had finally caught up. This is my fault. It's not, Mom said firmly. Your father's blood pressure has been an issue for years. But yes, the financial stress hasn't helped. Dad was released the next morning with blood pressure medication and orders to reduce stress. During the drive home, he turned to me. I wasn't in the hospital because of you, Michael. A 65-year-old man who eats too much red meat and doesn't exercise. But you're right, I have been worried about you. I'm working 2 jobs. Dad, I'm paying you back. What more do you want? I want you to have a life. Find someone to love, build a family, stop punishing yourself for past mistakes, and start building a future.
Oh.
That night, I wrote out a new plan. Instead of trying to pay off debt as quickly as possible, I would focus on building sustainable life. Keep the second job for now, but look for better paying primary work. Set aside money for my own future, not just past mistakes. Most importantly, remember that my parents didn't just want their money back, they wanted their son back. The job interview at Miller Automotive felt different from the start. Family-owned business with oil-stained floors and genuine warmth. Owner Jim Miller had built his business from nothing and still worked alongside employees. Marcus tells me you're a hard worker who's working 2 jobs and barely sleeping. That's not sustainable, son. I'm managing. I need someone who can grow with this business. Take on real responsibility. Are you that person? I thought about Dad's hospital words, about finding balance between responsibility and life. I want to be. Jim offered me operations manager, overseeing parts inventory and customer service, 30% more pay than my current job, enough to quit the evening position and still increase payments to my parents. One condition. You take this job, you commit fully. No second jobs, no splitting attention. I need to know you're all in. Leaving the rehabilitation center was harder than expected. Mrs. Patterson hugged me goodbye. You've got your whole life ahead of you, young man. Don't waste it looking backward. The new job challenged me in unexpected ways. Instead of following orders, I made decisions affecting entire operations. When major customers threatened to leave due to delivery delays, I found solutions. When our computer system crashed, I kept operations running during repairs. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was building something instead of just maintaining it. Jim trusted me with real responsibilities, and I rose to meet them with extra income. I increased monthly payments to $600 and started saving for my own future retirement account. Emergency fund, goals beyond just paying off debt. The change in my parents was immediate. Dad's blood pressure stabilized, and he started discussing retirement plans instead of financial worries. Mom reduced hospital hours and began mentoring new nurses. You look different, Sarah said. During July family dinner, more settled. 8. Feel different. Like I'm finally growing up. But the real test came in August when Jim approached me about buying into the business. I'm 60, Michael. I've been thinking about succession planning. You've proven yourself. You could be a real partner here. The opportunity was incredible, but required significant investment money I didn't have because of my debt. After sleepless nights running numbers, I did something I'd never done. asked for help without being desperate. Dad, I need to discuss something with you, I said. Finding him in the garage Saturday morning, I explained Jim's offer and financial implications. Dad listened thoughtfully. How much would you need? 20,000. But I'm not asking you to give it to me. I'm asking if we can restructure my debt payments. Pay you back more slowly, and you loan me money for this investment. Dad was quiet. For a long moment, a year ago, I would have said no. Not because I didn't want to help, but because I didn't trust you to handle it responsibly. And now I see a man who's learned the value of hard work and responsibility. Yes, we can work something out. The conversation that followed was different from Christmas. Instead of a parent bailing out a child, it was a business discussion between adults. We drew up formal agreement with interest rates and payment schedules. 3 months later, I signed partnership papers at Miller Automotive. At 35, I was part owner of a successful business. Finally building something meaningful, the debt to my parents remained, but no longer felt like a burden. It felt like an investment they'd made in my future, and I was determined to prove that investment worthwhile. By the next Christmas, everything had changed. I was living in my own house, again modest 2-bedroom place I could afford thanks to my partnership. The business was thriving. We'd expanded to include a repair shop. I'd hired 3 new employees. On Christmas Eve, I pulled into my parents' driveway carrying a manila envelope of my own. Walking through that front door felt different now. As a child seeking comfort, but as an adult ready to give back. Michael, Mom exclaimed, hugging me tight, "You're early. I wanted to talk to you and Dad before Sarah gets here." Inside was a check for $15,000 and a letter I'd spent weeks writing. Mom's hand shook as she read it, tears streaming down her face. "This is too much." We agreed on the payment schedule. The payment schedule was for the old debt. This is for the new debt, the debt I can never really repay. I walked to the window, looking out at the backyard where Dad had taught me baseball, where Mom had bandaged scraped knees, where they'd listened to my problems for 35 years. A year ago, you handed me a bill for $47,000. But that wasn't really what you were giving me. You were giving me a chance to become the man you raised me to be. Dad cleared his throat, struggling with emotions. Son, you don't owe us anything beyond what we agreed to. I owe you everything. It's not just the money, but the chance to prove I could be better. That I could be someone you could be proud of. We were always proud of you, Mom said quietly. You were patient with me. There's a difference. But now, I hope you can be proud of me too. The check would pay off most of my remaining debt, but more importantly, it represented something I'd never given them before. Security. With this payment, and regular income I was providing, they could truly retire. There's something else, I said, pulling out another envelope. I've been working with a financial advisor. I want to set up a retirement account for you, monthly income for the rest of your lives. Dad stood and placed a hand on my shoulder. What brought all this on, Mrs. Patterson? She told me life isn't about avoiding problems. It's about how you handle them when they come. You handled my problems with grace for years. Now it's my turn to handle yours. The conversation that followed was unlike any we'd had. We talked about the business, the retirement plans, the future we were building together. I told them about Jennifer, a nurse I'd been dating who'd helped me understand the difference between caring for someone and enabling them. When Sarah arrived with her family, I wasn't watching from the sidelines. I was part of it, contributing, helping, playing with my nephews without the weight of guilt that had shadowed me. As we sat around the dinner table, Dad raised his glass. To family, to second chances, and to the man my son has become. To growing up, I added, and to parents, who never gave up on me even when I'd given up on myself. Later, as we cleaned dishes, Mom pulled me aside. What you gave us today, it's not just about money, it's about knowing we succeeded as parents. Despite all our mistakes, we raised a son who knows how to do the right thing. You didn't make mistakes, Mom. You made sacrifices.
Standing at the
same window where I'd stood a year ago, everything was different. I was different. Dad joined me. You know what I'm most proud of? You didn't just pay us back. You paid it forward. The way you've grown, how you're treating Jennifer, running that business, you're building something bigger than settling a debt. I learned from the best. As I drove home that night, I thought about the journey that brought me here. A year ago, I'd been a 34-year-old man living like a teenager. The bill had felt like betrayal, but now I understood it for what it was, an act of love. They could have continued enabling me, sacrificing their financial security for mine. Instead, they'd given me something more valuable than money, the chance to become the man I was meant to be. The debt was almost paid off, but the lessons would last a lifetime. I'd learned that true independence isn't about not needing anyone. It's about being someone others can depend on. Responsibility isn't a burden, it's a privilege. And growing up isn't something that happens to you, it's something you choose to do. The bill my parents gave me that Christmas Eve cost $47,832, but the man I'd become in paying it back was worth far more than any amount of money. The circle was complete, and I was ready for whatever came next.